will broaden the program's reach. The Inter-American Committee on Tourism, the C2, convened ministerial-level policy dialogue in an urgent response to the impact of the pandemic on the hard-hit tourism and hospitality sectors. Policymakers and experts discussed biosanitary protocols, travel and visa facilitation, among other critical areas for the sector's recovery. Partnering with the George Washington University and the U.S. Bureau of Indian Affairs, we went ahead with the scheduled first Indigenous Tourism Forum of the Americas, pivoting to a virtual format and convening over 240 participants from indigenous communities, the private sector, and governments. SETI also integrated sustainable development practices in the COVID-19 response. The pandemic is a daily reminder of the links between water, health, sanitation, food security, and nutrition. We ensured the continuity of our water management projects in the Plata Basin and worked with governments and partners in the design of an investment portfolio valued at $90 million. Additionally, the Energy and Climate Partnership of the Americas continued to share relevant best practices and responses to the pandemic on energy and air quality. These few examples indicate our collective impact. We cannot do this alone. It is now more urgent than ever to address the region's structural weaknesses, to recover from the health, economic, and social crises occasioned by the pandemic and prepare for future shocks. It is imperative that we work together as we risk losing recent development gains and seeing millions fall back into poverty. It is time for the region to redirect course and pursue a more sustainable, resilient, and equitable future for all. We are in this together.
But the resilience building agenda is too big for any one stakeholder to address acting alone, and simply bringing together stakeholders, whether at the national, subnational, regional, or global level, is not enough. Effective, focused, and sustained coordination among stakeholders is paramount to provide countries with integrated and comprehensive support.
The OAS, as a hemispheric forum and honest broker, must continue to facilitate this process while we work with member states towards the attainment of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. Cooperation, collaboration, and partnerships that include all actors strengthen us, enabling us to be more than the sum of our parts. We can and we must work together. The future of our region depends on it.
CIM tiene una agenda enorme en el tema de democracia y de liderazgos. El primer ámbito tiene que ver con la gobernanza electoral, para que esta gobernanza electoral responda a las necesidades con las que fue creada, y es buscar los espacios de redistribución del poder. Después hay un programa interamericano sobre el liderazgo de las mujeres, donde generamos conocimiento y también tenemos cursos de capacitación. Hay un poderoso curso que ha llegado a más de 1000 mujeres con más de 15 ediciones, que es para candidatas electorales, en las cuales conversamos con ellas, pero también nos ponemos en una agenda de solidaridad y articulación y alianzas entre las mujeres, a pesar de las múltiples diferencias ideológicas o de partidos políticos. También hablamos de los temas de violencia política, porque no es lo mismo llegar que quedarse, y la violencia política es una forma de ejercicio de disciplinar a las mujeres para que vuelvan al mundo de lo privado y enfrentar la violencia, hacer buenas investigaciones, buenas leyes que permitan sancionar la violencia política. Es parte de las aspiraciones de la CIM en este programa de liderazgo de las mujeres. La aspiración histórica de las mujeres es estar en el mundo del público, que nuestro trabajo sea remunerado y que tenga un reconocimiento. COVID ha puesto en evidencia una profundización de las brechas existentes para el logro de este objetivo. Estas brechas existentes ahora dan cuenta de que podríamos tener un rezago de más de 2 décadas en el mundo laboral. Que el cierre de brechas, que se previó que podía tardar 100 años en cerrarse, ahora se habla de 135 años para cerrar la brecha entre los hombres y las mujeres. Entonces nuestro objetivo es que miren el derecho de las mujeres al empoderamiento económico, que el statement "quédate en casa", que es un viejo conocido del patriarcado, no sea que nos quedemos en casa siempre, y que entendamos que la inserción de la mitad de la población, de este talento humano que tiene una serie de ventajas competitivas, es necesario para el crecimiento económico. De manera que la CIM está colocando esta realidad, está colocando las necesidades de las mujeres y está haciendo unas recomendaciones de rutas para poder cumplir con el derecho al empoderamiento económico y con el crecimiento económico que requieren nuestras empobrecidas economías en tiempos de COVID.
Esta organización es el guardián regional en defensa de la democracia, la libertad y los derechos humanos. Los países se han comprometido con estos valores a través de instrumentos legales como la Carta Democrática Interamericana, la Convención Americana de Derechos Humanos y todas las demás convenciones interamericanas. Nuestro trabajo es mantener los más altos estándares. Debemos ser objetivos, analizar los hechos, denunciar cuando veamos corrupción, inequidad o amenazas a la libertad. En esos casos no podemos ser neutrales.
100 years since the inauguration of this building, the OAS headquarters, our institution still brings together the peoples of the Americas to address our responsibilities as a partnership of nations. As we look to the future, our work must also focus on the construction of a positive agenda that continues to favorably impact millions of lives every day.
The COVID-19 pandemic brought unprecedented challenges to all member states and the people we serve. In response, the OAS Secretariat for Integral Development adopted a three-pronged approach by 1. Adjusting our portfolio of existing projects, 2. Exploring new projects to meet emerging needs, and 3. Expanding multi-sectoral partnerships. The results achieved in 2020 demonstrate the resilience of our member states and the commitment of the OAS SETI to work with member states and partners towards our common goals in the development of our region. Our Network on Competitiveness launched the COVID-19 Ideas Accelerator, sharing 250 tools, health solutions, responses, and recovery plans. The Network for Labor Administration published a portfolio of responses from ministries of labor to COVID-19, sharing over 420 measures taken to protect workers, employment, and income. Likewise, The Inter-American Teacher Education Network series, Teaching STEM in Quarantine, provided 117,000 teachers with key tools to continue advancing STEM education during the pandemic. Through its network and platforms, the Inter-American Committee on Ports promoted international and national best practices, guidelines, protocols, and recommendations on COVID-19 safety measures and continuity of logistic operations. Initiatives such as the Education in Times of Change platform allowed us to meet urgent needs by offering timely tools on virtual education and a dedicated space for ministries to share strategies, actions, and solutions. Other programs such as the Row Fund stepped up, providing emergency grants to offset the challenges imposed on our students by the pandemic. SETI's partnerships are adding value to member states in the form of technical assistance, training, and access to tools and services. In partnership with leading private sector institutions, we offered micro, small, and medium enterprises access to online tools and training, increasing their visibility and participation in e-commerce, a key to their survival and growth in the pandemic and post-pandemic era. A new OAS SETI Facebook initiative provided 85,000 MSMEs across the region with capacity building opportunities and WhatsApp business tools to aid response, recovery, and resilience building. The Caribbean Small Business Development Centers program achieved real impact, supporting new businesses, expanding sales, and driving growth. A new network of Caribbean SPDCs will broaden the program's reach. The Inter-American Committee on Tourism, the C2, convened ministerial-level policy dialogue in an urgent response to the impact of the pandemic on the hard-hit tourism and hospitality sectors. Policymakers and experts discussed biosanitary protocols, travel and visa facilitation, among other critical areas for the sector's recovery. Partnering with the George Washington University and the U.S. Bureau of Indian Affairs, we went ahead with the scheduled first Indigenous Tourism Forum of the Americas, pivoting to a virtual format and convening over 240 participants from indigenous communities, the private sector, and governments. SETI also integrated sustainable development practices in the COVID-19 response. The pandemic is a daily reminder of the links between water, health, sanitation, food security, and nutrition. We ensured the continuity of our water management projects in the Plata Basin and worked with governments and partners in the design of an investment portfolio valued at $90 million. Additionally, the Energy and Climate Partnership of the Americas continued to share relevant best practices and responses to the pandemic on energy and air quality. These few examples indicate our collective impact. We cannot do this alone. It is now more urgent than ever to address the region's structural weaknesses, to recover from the health, economic, and social crises occasioned by the pandemic and prepare for future shocks. It is imperative that we work together as we risk losing recent development gains and seeing millions fall back into poverty. It is time for the region to redirect course and pursue a more sustainable, resilient, and equitable future for all. We are in this together.
But the resilience building agenda is too big for any one stakeholder to address acting alone, and simply bringing together stakeholders, whether at the national, subnational, regional, or global level, is not enough. Effective, focused, and sustained coordination among stakeholders is paramount to provide countries with integrated and comprehensive support.
The OAS, as a hemispheric forum and honest broker, must continue to facilitate this process while we work with member states towards the attainment of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. Cooperation, collaboration, and partnerships that include all actors strengthen us, enabling us to be more than the sum of our parts. We can and we must work together. The future of our region depends on it.
Bueno, la CIM tiene una agenda enorme en el tema de democracia y de liderazgos. El primer ámbito tiene que ver con la gobernanza electoral, para que esta gobernanza electoral responda a las necesidades con las que fue creada, y es buscar los espacios de redistribución del poder. Después hay un programa interamericano sobre el liderazgo de las mujeres, donde generamos conocimiento y también tenemos cursos de capacitación. Hay un poderoso curso que ha llegado a más de 1000 mujeres con más de 15 ediciones, que es para candidatas electorales, en las cuales conversamos con ellas, pero también nos ponemos en una agenda de solidaridad y articulación y alianzas entre las mujeres, a pesar de las múltiples diferencias ideológicas o de partidos políticos. También hablamos de los temas de violencia política, porque no es lo mismo llegar que quedarse, y la violencia política es una forma de ejercicio de disciplinar a las mujeres para que vuelvan al mundo de lo privado y enfrentar la violencia, hacer buenas investigaciones, buenas leyes que permitan sancionar la violencia política. Es parte de las aspiraciones de la CIM en este programa de liderazgo de las mujeres. La aspiración histórica de las mujeres es estar en el mundo de lo público, que nuestro trabajo sea remunerado y que tenga un reconocimiento. COVID ha puesto en evidencia una profundización de las brechas existentes para el logro de este objetivo. Estas brechas existentes ahora dan cuenta de que podríamos tener un rezago de más de 2 décadas en el mundo laboral, que el cierre de brechas que se previó que podía tardar 100 años en cerrarse, ahora se habla de 135 años para cerrar la brecha entre los hombres y las mujeres. Entonces, nuestro objetivo es que miren el derecho de las mujeres al empoderamiento económico, que el statement "quédate en casa", que es un viejo conocido del patriarcado, no sea que nos quedemos en casa siempre, y que entendamos que la inserción de la mitad de la población, de este talento humano que tiene una serie de ventajas competitivas, es necesario para el crecimiento económico. De manera que la CIM está colocando esta realidad, está colocando las necesidades de las mujeres y está haciendo unas recomendaciones de rutas para poder cumplir con el derecho al empoderamiento económico y con el crecimiento económico que requieren nuestras empobrecidas economías en tiempos de COVID.
Esta organización es el guardián regional en defensa de la democracia, la libertad y los derechos humanos. Los países se han comprometido con estos valores a través de instrumentos legales como la Carta Democrática Interamericana, la Convención Americana de Derechos Humanos y todas las demás convenciones interamericanas. Nuestro trabajo es mantener los más altos estándares. Debemos ser objetivos, analizar los hechos, denunciar cuando veamos corrupción, inequidad o amenazas a la libertad. En esos casos no podemos ser neutrales.
than 100 years since the inauguration of this building, the OAS headquarters, our institution still brings together the peoples of the Americas to address our responsibilities as a partnership of nations. As we look to the future, our work must also focus on the construction of a positive agenda that continues to favorably impact millions of lives every day.
The COVID-19 pandemic brought unprecedented challenges to all member states and the people we serve. In response, the OAS Secretariat for Integral Development adopted a three-pronged approach by 1. Adjusting our portfolio of existing projects, 2. Exploring new projects to meet emerging needs, and 3. Expanding multi-sectoral partnerships. The results achieved in 2020 demonstrate the resilience of our member states and the commitment of the OAS SETI to work with member states and partners towards our common goals in the development of our region. Our Network on Competitiveness launched the COVID-19 Ideas Accelerator, sharing 250 tools, health solutions, responses, and recovery plans. The Network for Labor Administration published a portfolio of responses from ministries of labor to COVID-19, sharing over 420 measures taken to protect workers, employment, and income. Likewise, the Inter-American Teacher Education Network series, Teaching STEM in Quarantine, provided 117,000 teachers with key tools to continue advancing STEM education during the pandemic. Through its network and platforms, the Inter-American Committee on Ports promoted international and national best practices, guidelines, protocols, and recommendations on COVID-19 safety measures and continuity of logistic operations. Initiatives such as the Education in Times of Change platform allowed us to meet urgent needs by offering timely tools on virtual education and a dedicated space for ministries to share strategies, actions, and solutions. Other programs such as the Row Fund stepped up, providing emergency grants to offset the challenges imposed on our students by the pandemic. SETI's partnerships are adding value to member states in the form of technical assistance, training, and access to tools and services. In partnership with leading private sector institutions, we offered micro, small, and medium enterprises access to online tools and training, increasing their visibility and participation in e-commerce, a key to their survival and growth in the pandemic and post-pandemic era. A new OAS SETI Facebook initiative provided 85,000 MSMEs across the region with capacity building opportunities and WhatsApp business tools to aid response, recovery, and resilience building. The Caribbean Small Business Development Centers program achieved real impact, supporting new businesses, expanding sales, and driving growth. A new network of Caribbean SPDCs will broaden the program's reach. The Inter-American Committee on Tourism, the C2, convened ministerial-level policy dialogue in an urgent response to the impact of the pandemic on the hard-hit tourism and hospitality sectors. Policymakers and experts discussed biosanitary protocols, travel and visa facilitation, among other critical areas for the sector's recovery. Partnering with the George Washington University and the U.S. Bureau of Indian Affairs, we went ahead with the scheduled first Indigenous Tourism Forum of the Americas, pivoting to a virtual format and convening over 240 participants from indigenous communities, the private sector, and governments. SETI also integrated sustainable development practices in the COVID-19 response. The pandemic is a daily reminder of the links between water, health, sanitation, food security, and nutrition. We ensured the continuity of our water management projects in the Plata Basin and worked with governments and partners in the design of an investment portfolio valued at $90 million. Additionally, the Energy and Climate Partnership of the Americas continued to share relevant best practices and responses to the pandemic on energy and air quality. These few examples indicate our collective impact. We cannot do this alone. It is now more urgent than ever to address the region's structural weaknesses, to recover from the health, economic, and social crises occasioned by the pandemic and prepare for future shocks. It is imperative that we work together as we risk losing recent development gains and seeing millions fall back into poverty. It is time for the region to redirect course and pursue a more sustainable, resilient, and equitable future for all. We are in this together.
But the resilience building agenda is too big for any one stakeholder to address acting alone, and simply bringing together stakeholders, whether at the national, subnational, regional, or global level, is not enough. Effective, focused, and sustained coordination among stakeholders is paramount to provide countries with integrated and comprehensive support.
The OAS, as a hemispheric forum and honest broker, must continue to facilitate this process while we work with member states towards the attainment of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. Cooperation, collaboration, and partnerships that include all actors strengthen us, enabling us to be more than the sum of our parts. We can and we must work together. The future of our region depends on it.
Bueno, la CIM tiene una agenda enorme en el tema de democracia y de liderazgos. El primer ámbito tiene que ver con la gobernanza electoral, para que esta gobernanza electoral responda a las necesidades con las que fue creada, y es buscar los espacios de redistribución del poder. Después hay un programa interamericano sobre el liderazgo de las mujeres, donde generamos conocimiento y también tenemos cursos de capacitación. Hay un poderoso curso que ha llegado a más de 1000 mujeres con más de 15 ediciones, que es para candidatas electorales, en las cuales conversamos con ellas, pero también nos ponemos en una agenda de solidaridad y articulación y alianzas entre las mujeres, a pesar de las múltiples diferencias ideológicas o de partidos políticos. También hablamos de los temas de violencia política, porque no es lo mismo llegar que quedarse, y la violencia política es una forma de ejercicio de disciplinar a las mujeres para que vuelvan al mundo de lo privado y enfrentar la violencia, hacer buenas investigaciones, buenas leyes que permitan sancionar la violencia política. Es parte de las aspiraciones de la CIM en este programa de liderazgo de las mujeres. La aspiración histórica de las mujeres es estar en el mundo del público, que nuestro trabajo sea remunerado y que tenga un reconocimiento. COVID ha puesto en evidencia una profundización de las brechas existentes para el logro de este objetivo. Estas brechas existentes ahora dan cuenta de que podríamos tener un rezago de más de 2 décadas en el mundo laboral. Que el cierre de brechas, que se previó que podía tardar 100 años en cerrarse, ahora se habla de 135 años para cerrar la brecha entre los hombres y las mujeres. Entonces, nuestro objetivo es que miren el derecho de las mujeres al empoderamiento económico, que el statement "quédate en casa", que es un viejo conocido del patriarcado, no sea que nos quedemos en casa siempre, y que entendamos que la inserción de la mitad de la población, de este talento humano que tiene una serie de ventajas competitivas, es necesario para el crecimiento económico. De manera que la CIM está colocando esta realidad, está colocando las necesidades de las mujeres y está haciendo unas recomendaciones de rutas para poder cumplir con el derecho al empoderamiento económico y con el crecimiento económico que requieren nuestras empobrecidas economías en tiempos de COVID.
Hoy, esta organización es el guardián regional en defensa de la democracia, la libertad y los derechos humanos. Los países se han comprometido con estos valores a través de instrumentos legales como la Carta Democrática Interamericana, la Convención Americana de Derechos Humanos y todas las demás convenciones interamericanas. Nuestro trabajo es mantener los más altos estándares. Debemos ser objetivos, analizar los hechos, denunciar cuando veamos corrupción, inequidad o amenazas a la libertad. En esos casos no podemos ser neutrales.
More than 100 years since the inauguration of this building, the OAS headquarters, our institution still brings together the peoples of the Americas to address our responsibilities as a partnership of nations. As we look to the future, our work must also focus on the construction of a positive agenda that continues to favorably impact millions of lives every day.
Can you see me now?
Oh, yes. Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Good morning. Madam Chair, with your permission, I'd like to read the list of countries that are present here in the room and those that have done the audio and video test. Argentina, Belize, Bolivia, Brazil, Canada, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, the Commonwealth of Dominica, Ecuador, El Salvador, the United States of America, Grenada, Guatemala, Guyana, Haiti, Honduras, Mexico, Paraguay, Peru, República Dominicana, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, St. Lucia, Suriname, Trinidad and Tobago, Uruguay, Venezuela, Panama. This meeting has quorum, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Good morning, esteemed colleagues. Following the verification of the quorum by the Secretariat, I am pleased to declare open this special meeting of the Permanent Council, which has been convened at the request of the Permanent Mission of Suriname as contained in document CP-INF 9411/22 for the purpose of receiving the Minister of Foreign Affairs, International Business and International Cooperation, His Excellency Albert Ramdin. Considering the draft order of business CP-OD 2385/22 as adopted, allow me to express on behalf of the Permanent Council our warmest welcome to Foreign Minister Albert Ramdin. Minister Ramdin, welcome back to the House of the Americas. We now move to agenda item 2. Foreign Minister Albert Ramdin is a Surinamese diplomat who has served as Minister of Foreign Affairs, International Business and International Cooperation of the Republic of Suriname since July 16, 2020. He has had a successful career in public service at the local, national, and international levels. In 1997, Minister Ramdin served as permanent representative of Suriname to the Organization of American States. Later, in 1999, he served as Assistant Secretary General for Foreign and Community Relations of CARICOM, where he was in charge of directing CARICOM's foreign policy and developing ties among its member states. During this time, Minister Ramdin oversaw CARICOM's technical preparations for the Third Summit of the Americas and played a crucial role in advancing the core interests of the regional bloc. In 2001, Minister Ramdin was appointed as an advisor of the OAS Secretary General with a focus on Caribbean affairs. In 2005, Minister Ramdin was elected as the Assistant Secretary General of the OAS and was re-elected in 2010. During his tenure, Minister Ramdin was able to make significant contributions to all 4 pillars of the organization, most notably organizing the first ever private sector dialogue with the Permanent Council of the OAS and the organization's inaugural meeting with CEOs and other private sector stakeholders from Central America and the Caribbean. This, Minister Ramdin, counts among many other initiatives. After completing his second term as OAS Assistant Secretary General in 2015, he returned to his home country to contribute towards its development. Minister, it is an honor for me as permanent representative of St. Vincent and the Grenadines and chair of the Permanent Council of the Organization of American States to welcome you. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, and good morning to all. Ambassador Luann Galen Gilchrist, Permanent Representative of St. Vincent and the Grenadines and Chair of the Permanent Council. Mr. Luis Almagro, Secretary General of the Organization of American States, distinguished permanent representatives, distinguished representatives of the observer states to the OAS, distinguished delegates, staff of the OAS Secretariat, ladies and gentlemen. Madam Chair, first of all, thank you very much for convening this special meeting of the Permanent Council to allow me to have a conversation with member states of this august multilateral institution of the Americas. I bring you greetings from His Excellency Chandrika Prasad Santokhi, President of the Republic of Suriname and also current Chair of the Caribbean Community. And he had also a strong engagement with this organization when he chaired CICAT. Madam Chair, the last time I addressed the Permanent Council was exactly 7 years and 5 days ago, almost the same time, when I did my farewell speech as Assistant Secretary General, and I'm pleased to be back and to share with you some thoughts that may be relevant to include in the ongoing deliberations at the Organization of American States. Madam Chair, Secretary General, ambassadors, we live in difficult times. We need to reflect, and then we need to act. Time is of the essence, and much work needs to be done to create that inclusive world we want, that peaceful and prosperous society we all aspire to, and that natural environment that we must treat with care and need to protect and restore. There is simply, from our perspective, no other option. The world, and so also the Western Hemisphere, is faced with many challenges, and we all know them. And the origin of these challenges is only with a few, but the whole world is affected by the fallout. The raging effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on our societies has been devastating, both in financial economic terms, as well as socially and psychologically. The long-term impact of COVID-19 on our society still needs to be researched and understood. In the meantime, many countries, small and large, have difficulty, have many challenges rebooting their economies. The supply chain costs have created scarcity and increased purchasing prices for the end user. The ongoing and unacceptable war against Ukraine is still ongoing, and all we can hope for is that diplomatic démarches will at least result in a ceasefire and ultimately an end to this man-made human disaster. The impact of the war is felt in all economies worldwide, with rising fuel and food prices, indirect impact on production and manufacturing, increased inflation, as we witness in all countries. And especially the small and vulnerable countries feel the impact in a climate of declining income and purchasing power. These new global challenges, Madam Chair, come on top of the existing problems of the impact of climate change, high debt burden, economic decline, and security concerns. You and I know them all, so I will skip going into detail in each of these. But we need to be assertive and remain vigilant in raising these threats to our societies, because absence of investments, financing for development, result in political instability, social unrest, poverty, and ultimately migration and insecurity. And these challenges cannot be resolved by one country or one region alone and on its own. For that, the interdependency is too strong, as we are all part of the same global trading system. Therefore, we have no other choice than to work together in a constructive manner without, let me repeat, without excluding anyone or any country for that matter. Madam Chair, we must learn lessons of these recent and still ongoing crises. We must draw conclusions to build back better. The international order, out of which solidarity and international cooperation should have emerged when COVID-19 hit the world, was initially forgotten and replaced by national self-interest. As we have seen during the beginning of the ongoing crisis, the first response is often one of a nationalistic nature. While in some aspects such behavior is understandable, this response should not become policy and part of international diplomatic, financial, and economic endeavors. Those with limited resources and access to major producers and distributors of vaccines were left alone, like in the Caribbean. Today, production of vaccines and research in different regions is being considered so as to prevent the experienced dependency. The current international system could not prevent a war being waged against a small country. And it is regrettable that months after, we still have to continue witness, often live, the death of innocent human beings and the destruction of a nation. It is a weakness of the international order that cannot be accepted. I strongly believe that the world needs a more inclusive and equitable multilateral framework, globally and regionally, that has a mandate to act when necessary to uphold international law. Therefore, the current system and setup requires a thorough assessment with the aim to put a more effective multilateral framework in place. And as part of this review process and based on the global agenda, I'm also of the view that when we adopt goals and objectives, that they must be translated in an action-oriented agenda of the Bretton Woods institutions, the World Trade Organizations, and the regional financial institutions. The global financial architecture cannot be only a matter for the richer and the more powerful countries. Issues like the graduation policy, the de-risking and correspondent banking issues, eligibility criteria for financial instruments, the absence of a redistribution tool for the additional SDGs, just to name a few, must be treated fairly and with good understanding of the impact these have on especially the small and vulnerable countries. I'm therefore pleased to note that the current chair of the G20 group, the Republic of Indonesia, has engaged sub-regional groupings in the preparation of the G20 summit of this year in Bali, Indonesia. I had the opportunity on the 8th of July to address some of these concerns at the G20 Foreign Ministers meeting in Bali, albeit virtually. CARICOM will be represented by its current chair, Suriname, at this summit in November coming. Madam Chair, the other global challenge we face is that of climate change, or more precise, a climate crisis. Most of our countries have been affected in some form by the climate crisis. Over the past months, Suriname has been affected by extreme high rainfall, whereby even a dry season was skipped, resulting in floods in many parts of the country. Early July 2022, a couple of weeks ago, Secretary General Antonio Guterres of the United Nations paid a short visit to Suriname and visited some of the sites that were affected by climate change. And he firsthand witnessed the challenges a small country with a low-lying coastal area faces when the mangrove as a natural barrier against erosion has diminished. The result is the inflow of salt water, making fertile agricultural land not suitable for agricultural production anymore. Climate change, ladies and gentlemen, will limit food production capacity, and food security will become one of the major threats together with water security. Our realities therefore stand in stark contrast to the lofty and noble ideals, goals, and commitments made globally on a regular basis. This political commitment is necessary, as this is not a problem caused principally by the small and vulnerable countries. It is great that pledges are made to mobilize the earmarked resources, but the fact is that so far, most of the pledges have not been delivered on, and that a very small amount has been allocated to the Caribbean. It is important to note that these resources are accessible to the affected countries. Very often, it takes 3 to 4 years before resources are approved. Application procedures need to be simplified, and the process must be less complicated and more efficient. Otherwise, all these noble goals and objectives will stand for nothing. The implementation deficit of these global funds must be addressed urgently, and the priority must be to finance projects that have an immediate, direct impact on preservation and adaptation. In many, if not most, of the cases, required knowledge and executing capacity is available locally, so we don't need more consultancies and studies. Let's work on solving the problem on the ground. Suriname remains committed to the agreed COP26 goals, the preservation of our forest coverage of more than 90%, remain carbon negative as one of the only 3 countries in the world, and the execution of our national determined goals as submitted to the UNFCCC. For this reality to remain as it is, internationally specific carbon credit, carbon trading, and carbon financing should be established. Suriname, for example, is a carbon negative country, functions as a sink for carbon emissions from other countries, produces oxygen for all in the world, and we are not even compensated for that. We also must realize, Madam Chair, that the people of Suriname rightfully seek continued economic progress and higher standards of living. Therefore, a delicate balance needs to be found between environmental preservation and protection and social economic development. Ladies and gentlemen, we often speak about the common agenda for the world and the Sustainable Development Goals as pronounced by the United Nations. And in my view, they provide a solid basis for the future in terms of the targets to be met. But a common agenda requires a common commitment and approach with effective and necessary financial instruments. In translating that global agenda of peace, prosperity, inclusivity, and equity, we must also be ready to discuss how our own inter-American system can be made more responsive. OAS is an intergovernmental body driven by member states, so we need to have all on board. Important values of democracy, rule of law, human rights, and independent and strong judiciary and good governance must continue to be advocated. The OAS is the only platform where all countries in our hemisphere are represented. This OAS has played an important role in the Americas, not only in fostering unity most of the times, but also promoting electoral processes and protecting human rights. The Americas must remain a zone of peace. Distant conflicts must not be transferred or imported in our own hemisphere. And this role must continue, Secretary General. The OAS agenda must reflect the needs and priorities of its member states. There should be special attention to small and vulnerable countries. I believe that the political debate should feature some of the earlier mentioned issues which are high on the agenda of the region we belong to. The proposed multidimensional vulnerability index, which CARICOM has put forward, financing for development, climate instruments, and we can continue. In fact, I would expect the OAS even to take the lead on this and call for attention internationally. As the principal hemispheric organization, we also have to carry out our responsibilities in support of countries and peoples in need. Domestic political and social economic challenges, upon request of the respective country, must be addressed through diplomatic engagement and mobilization of all the other parts of the inter-American system, like the IDB, PAHO, and ICA. And among others, our sister nation, the Republic of Haiti, comes then to mind. Haiti's problems are multifaceted and are taking place in the same geographic space at the same time. From a governance perspective, not an easy task to address. Haiti, as a member of the international community, must be supported on their terms and on the basis of a Haitian-initiated and owned plan. That is the best basis for success on the long term. I had the honor to recently chair the 4th International Haiti Partners Meeting and also to be involved in the discussions on Haiti's current challenges in CARICOM at heads of government and ministers of foreign affairs level. At all these meetings, Haiti was represented at high levels. Madam Chair, I believe that we all look forward to the completion of the investigation to the heinous assassination of President Jovenel Moïse and bringing the perpetrators to justice. The most urgent and critical challenge to the Haitian people and the state is the deteriorating security situation caused by the threats posed by several gangs operating in Port-au-Prince and in surrounding areas. The impact of this unfavorable security environment and the threats towards the judiciary add to the complexity of the situation on the ground. The ongoing dialogue among the political stakeholders must continue to facilitate consensus on the way forward. Part of this consensus must be a roadmap towards elections, including the formation of a legitimate professional electoral council and approval of the electoral calendar. The emerging humanitarian crisis in Port-au-Prince and other regions require the attention of the international and regional community. I'm pleased to see that, albeit with some delay, that the term of the BNU mandate has been extended by the full United Nations Security Council. I believe this is important to be able to support the process, while we may have to start thinking not only about a term expansion, but also a broadening of the mandate. I believe that the discussions in the International Haiti Partners Meeting with a strong, visible, and dedicated CARICOM support could potentially form a basis of increased and intensified support to the Republic of Haiti, especially in the area of security and governance. CARICOM leaders have mandated a political mission soon to take place, depending on the security environment, consisting of prominent persons of the region and high-level government ministers to visit Haiti and assess the assistance required. More engagement with Haiti is important. For a successful outcome, there must also be a coherent approach, regionally and internationally. In this regard, the OAS member states may wish to consider re-establishing the Group of Friends on Haiti so that a more measured and consistent support with regular updates can be developed. The OAS must play its role in terms of security assistance and the electoral process. Madam Chair, Secretary General, distinguished ambassadors, initially and ultimately, the solution must be a Haitian one, owned by the key stakeholders of Haiti, Haiti's committed partners in the international community, including the Caribbean community, can only assist on the basis of a plan for Haiti's current leadership. Ladies and gentlemen, Despite all the challenges which we face in our own hemisphere, the horizon, in my view, is bright if we do the right thing. The growth potential in our hemisphere is promising. However, we will not be able to capitalize this opportunity if political instability, border and other kinds of conflicts and insecurity remains. These will prevent the region to attract the necessary investments, expertise, and export markets. Newfound oil and gas resources in Suriname and Guyana, possibly also French Guyana, Grenada and Barbados as well, with other existing players as Trinidad and Tobago, will provide new avenues for sustainable economic development and wealth creation. These revenues will form the basis for the transition of our economy from a primarily carbon-based production system to a green economy by in fact, the transition process has phasing out the carbon-based energy generation. In the meantime, Suriname is committed to an environmentally friendly commercial exploitation of its natural resources in compliance with international standards. These major economic prospects, taking into account the de-risking on energy supply in other parts of the world, may change the face of the integration process in the Americas and in the sub-regions. We should be prepared to engage in that strategic repositioning process and be ready to accept and adjust our policies. Madam Chair, Secretary General, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, on the heels of the recently held Summit of the Americas in Los Angeles, we must not lose momentum. Suriname, as the current chair of the Caribbean community, will utilize every opportunity in the coming months, including the OAS GA in Lima, Peru, the G20 Summit in Bali, Indonesia, and the COP27 Global Gathering in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, to voice its and the region's view on the critical matters which I addressed before. And in closing, Madam Chair, we must be clear that if we really want to improve the lives of the people in our own hemisphere, we need to go back to the original purpose of this organization, and that is to work towards peace and prosperity for all in the Americas through a process of engagement and inclusivity. We may want to review, rethink, and redesign the Inter-American institutional framework into a new multilateral system that is more effective in addressing the existing developmental needs and the current political issues in the hemisphere, so a process of inclusion, support to countries in need, and build a peaceful society as a whole, with recognition of the cultural and political diversity our own hemisphere represents. And as we are all linked through history, political alliances, and a common goal, we must strengthen the OAS as a leading institution in the Western Hemisphere to facilitate and direct this process. Ultimately, Madam Chair, distinguished ambassadors, it is the countries and their political leadership that will determine the future of this Americas and the future of all of us. I thank you very much for your attention.
Minister, I thank you very much for your enlightening presentation. I would now like to offer the floor to those delegations wishing to make any comments.
Isn't there?
I'm pleased to offer the floor to the Ambassador of the Dominican Republic. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. On behalf of Belize, Costa Rica, Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Panama, I take the floor. These are member countries of the Central American Integration System, and we greet you and offer the warmest welcome to Foreign Minister Alberto Ramdin. We welcome you to this House. We also express how pleased we are to the Chair for having convened this special session of the Permanent Council. Mr. Foreign Minister Ramdin, we thank you very much for your presentation on the prospects for the Caribbean. SICA has taken note of what you have said, and I take this occasion to recognize the commitment that your country has stated in considering this region one of peace and unity, and we are very pleased also to hear your desire to strengthen our ties from the Central American integration system. We are willing to work together with CARICOM, and we reassert our commitment to move forward with a common agenda. Your reading about the need for us to step up the processes of economic cooperation and in security for the movement of goods and services and people, and to expand connectivity is something that we all should desire. So, Mr. Minister, as you said in a number of different fora, the majority of people in this room share in needs and interests, but also threats, especially global warming and climate change, the changing patterns of climate leading to mass displacements of people, the destruction of property, and violence and greater vulnerabilities. None of these problems can be addressed individually. They call for collective and coordinated action, just as you have rightfully said. The challenge of food security is greater than ever. The low access to financing to mitigate and to adapt to natural disasters in a context in which the war in Europe has caused much uncertainty. We in our region have all the potential to strategically and collectively make use of our human capital, natural resources for effective development. As at the beginning of this month was said, that we need to be creative in our approach. We have to be innovative, create more opportunities for public-private partnerships, and to yield greater responsibilities and opportunities to our youth. An effective multilateral diplomacy system is the key link to address all of the things that we've been talking about in this hemisphere. Without a doubt, action needs to be taken now. Your presence here at the Organization of American States bears witness to the recognition and value that this venue has. Thank you very much.
By your leave, representatives of Canada and other countries, I'm asking you to give way to the permanent representative of Haiti, as he requested the floor earlier but had experienced some technical difficulties. Thank you very much for your consideration. Ambassador, you have the floor. Haiti.
Thank you, Chair.
Madam Chair, allow me to extend the warmest welcome to His Excellency, Minister of Foreign Affairs, of Business and International Cooperation of Suriname, who is once more back home in this prestigious and beautiful Hall of the Americas at the headquarters of the Organization of American States. And we are most grateful, Minister, for this sweeping review you have given us of the situation of the Americas, and indeed the issues confronting not only the whole hemisphere, but specifically Haiti. We thank you for that. Now, Madam Chair, in terms of security, we know that the pandemic has been a tremendous scourge for most of the countries of the hemisphere. But security in the sense of arms, of public safety, are also a challenge. And on our island, kidnapping continues to be an ongoing headache, a nightmare, and by day or by night, every family is confronted by this. No police force, and I dare say ours is no exception, can consider itself above and beyond the reach of these criminal gangs that operate continent-wide. We are seeking so hard to reestablish our governmental institutions, the training, the economy necessary to substantiate this, to buttress it. And while, Madam Chair, we did go through a couple of rather tense days just last week because of lack of fuel and the distribution thereof, the government has bent over backwards to do what it could to change the supply of carbon fuels, and we have used the central budget to that end. The police and the customs are also doing their part. But we know that there has been a stash of arms that were found. Despite this, tremendous amounts of munitions and what we could do to identify this and stop it, the fact of the matter is, yet again, we are very far from saying, oh, well, that's done. Not at all. And as the UN has said, July 23rd was mentioned as a special date. And indeed, the Prime Minister, Henry, said that ongoing negotiations would take place sector-wide among the various allies of the one group and the 23 September group. The dialogue is ongoing. At the level of the OAS, if my focus can change to this particular forum, 10th of July last, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of my country and the representative of the OAS signed a cooperation agreement for strengthening of the national police in Haiti, and I deeply thank the Secretary General of the OAS for this ongoing commitment of the OAS in our peace process. Let us also take this opportunity to congratulate CARICOM for its own leadership. Very, very complex task, as we know, but we know that at the international level, and not least at the level of CARICOM, Haiti continues to be the beneficiary of such aid and such attention. Nonetheless, we continue to need that strong arm of cooperation of all of our international friends, and not least CARICOM, for obvious reasons, played a crucial role at critical moments of the history of my country. And we are so fortunate to be able to draw on the very great wealth of competence and strength of our own region to overcome the challenges we have and to meet the hopes and aspirations of our own population. Thank you very much, Madam.
I'm now pleased to offer the floor to Ambassador Adsett of Canada, and thank you once again. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Good morning, colleagues. It's a pleasure to see you all. And Minister Ramdeen, let me start by, on behalf of Canada, joining with other delegations in extending to you a very warm welcome or a welcome back to this council. And let me thank you also for sharing the perspectives of your government with us today. I'd also like to take this opportunity to extend our congratulations on the recent successful 43rd Conference of CARICOM Heads of Government, and also for the robust communique that came from that meeting as well. From our perspective, Canada is very much eager to work with Suriname, both as CARICOM chair and also within this organization, to advance shared priorities. You've mentioned some of them this morning. They include recovery from COVID, climate resilience, food security, and stability in the hemisphere. We're also looking forward to collaborating with your country and CARICOM on the implementation of summit commitments. Chair and Minister Ramdeen, let me finish with a couple of comments that reflect what was just raised a few minutes ago. Let me begin by thanking Suriname for chairing the 4th ministerial level meeting on Haiti on July 8th of 2022. That is an example of the way in which diplomatic initiatives that are carried out together can help to build support for actions and it was mentioned just a few moments ago as well, such as the recent UN Security Council decision to renew the mandate of the UN Integrated Office in Haiti, well known to colleagues as BINU, and also a way to build support for further coordinated actions. We took very good note of the suggestions that you had made this morning as well, and also the comments from our colleague, the distinguished permanent representative of Haiti, about ways that we might continue to work together to support efforts in that country and to work together on those issues. And thank you very much for raising those matters this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. I now offer the floor to the permanent representative of Mexico. Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mexico greets Foreign Minister Albert Ramdin at this special session of the Permanent Council. Your broad knowledge of the OAS and its challenges is very worthwhile and welcome at a very complex, challenging scenario that calls for our countries to undertake substantive changes to take on with greater commitment and efficiency our responsibilities. The virtues of multilateralism are obvious and appreciated, but along with that, there are still challenges which oftentimes make it very difficult for us to improve people's lives, high costs. These two elements, among others, make it very difficult for us to offer solutions when dealing with emergency matters that speak to the pillars of this organization, but this pattern is also something we see playing out in other areas. The lessons learned over the last couple of years in the financial difficulties we faced and the political climate that prevails makes it necessary for us to go back to the charter of this organization, which are binding for member states and calls for a redefinition of priorities of multilateralism that meets people's urgent needs. Mexico believes and works in a responsible way toward achieving multilateralism that would benefit people, honoring the principles on which the OAS rests. We reiterate Mexico's commitment to continue working to meet the common objectives among our countries and that we share with CARICOM and the members, CELAC, OAS, the Caribbean Association of States, and all the multilateral groups that we are part of. Thank you very much.
To offer the floor to the permanent representative of Uruguay. Excellency, the floor is yours.
Mr. Foreign Minister, as coordinator of the Southern Group comprised of Uruguay, Colombia, Bolivia, Argentina, Ecuador, Peru, Brazil, Paraguay, Chile, and Venezuela. I would just like to say that we identify with your words. Some of my colleagues certainly will take the floor, but we as a group feel the need to express agreement with your remarks. I have been admiring you for a long time now in the positions you've held in Costa Rica and elsewhere. In this activity, one learns how to read between the lines, not just what is said, but with subtlety is established in a hierarchy of meaning. I understand very well, as a small country, what you mean when you talk about the things you've been talking about. I know what it is to feel diversity, to be in places where small countries don't always have, aren't always on equal footing, have all the same possibilities as others. So when you speak of cooperation and stability, what the Dominican Republic has said is right on mark, as well as the contribution made by Mexico is correct as regards what can diplomacy do, how much can it do, and how much can it not do. And sometimes it's what is avoided is greater than that which is readily seeable or covered in the press. You speak of climate change. You're right. We are going through temperatures on this planet that we haven't seen for a long time, and many on our continent are also registering unprecedented temperatures throughout the Americas. We know exactly what that means and what you've been talking about. So, Mr. Minister of Foreign Affairs of Suriname, your perception, your sensitivity is our perception as well. We feel the same thing. We do need your contribution, know this, to guide us, to help us reflect deeply as the times require for us to focus mostly on consensus. We always have to understand when there are matters that are sensitive for one and all alike, and countries, when they raise their voice, speak with a sense of propriety, and we all need to respect countries when they do speak out. Thank you very much, Mr. Minister.
The floor to His Excellency Sir Ronald Sanders, Permanent Representative of Antigua and Barbuda. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, may I join the other speakers, including yourself, in the warm welcome which has been given this morning to Foreign Minister Albert Ramdin of Suriname and, of course, of CARICOM. As everybody pointed out before, he is no stranger to this hall of the Americas. And he is not a stranger to many of us who have worked with him over the years and who understand the quality of his intellect and the capacity he has for bringing practical solutions to real problems. Those of us who listened to him keenly today recognize that what he set out was an agenda which could be an agenda for each of our countries and indeed for all of us collectively. On the matter of COVID, which he raised, pointing out that COVID has not disappeared, even though it has wrecked many of our economies and continues to do so now with the continuing effects on the supply chain, which has pushed up the cost of food and also the cost of living in all of our countries, a situation which has been exacerbated by the Russian unprovoked invasion of Ukraine. But I have to say that the reason I am not physically present at the meeting this morning is precisely because a member of my staff contracted COVID last week, and out of an abundance of caution, until the rest of us are assured that we are either negative or positive, I did not want to risk coming to the Permanent Council this morning in the event that I may be infectious. I don't think I am, but in the event that I might have been infectious, I did not want to pass anything on to anyone else. That is the single reason why I am not there personally to welcome Minister Ramdin. Now, Minister Ramdin talked about the need for a more fair and equitable international system, including of the financial architecture. This is a point upon which every CARICOM country, and indeed countries in Central America and smaller countries in South America, would also agree. The time has now come for all our voices to be heard if the system is to become more equitable, more fair, and more just. He talked too about the situation in Haiti and did so with a particular perspective of the events that are taking place in that country against a historical background and the role of the United Nations in all that is taking place there. There is no question that the matter of Haiti is urgent. There is also no question that the solution to the Haitian problem must come from within Haiti itself. We, the rest of the international community, can be helpful to Haiti. We wish to be helpful to Haiti, but the Haitian actors must also get their act together in providing us with a unified, agreed response to where they see their country going. They can provide that. I have no doubt that the international community will be helpful. But as has been pointed out by major countries in the United Nations Security Council, Haiti has a problem of gangs, and the problem of gangs has to be solved. It will not be solved by the Haitian forces alone. Other countries have to be helpful to Haiti in bringing the gang warfare under control. It is almost difficult to imagine how Haiti can proceed as a normal country to hold elections in a normal way and to ensure that the candidates that are put up for the National Assembly of Haiti are not people who themselves come from criminal gangs. To ensure all of this, that is to ensure the future of Haiti, we all have an obligation to act. Now, one of the things that Minister Ramdin suggested today was the recreation, the resuscitation of the Friends of Haiti within the Organization of American States. And I wish to associate my own delegation with that call. It is necessary that the OAS take a more active interest in what is happening in Haiti, and not only some of the members of the OAS, but all of the member states. After all, our charter obliges us to do precisely that. I won't tarry much longer in my remarks of welcome to Minister Ramdin, except to say that I think once again that he has laid out an impressive agenda for all of us to think about. He pointed out, of course, that the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and the Common Agenda is itself a blueprint for where we should be going. But he stressed that we can't have a common agenda without a common commitment. We cannot continue to pay lip service. We cannot continue to speak without acting. If not, the consequences of all of that will be increased poverty, increased crime, increased organized crime, including drug trafficking and guns trafficking, leading to migration, more irregular migration, and more refugees. There's a consequence in all of this for all of us. I thank the Minister for bringing all of this to our attention this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. I'm now pleased to offer the floor to the interim representative of the United States. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The United States thanks His Excellency, Foreign Minister Albert Ramdin, for his presentation today and welcomes you back to the OAS. We take note of your presentation and thank you for coming here today to lay out CARICOM's priorities for the Inter-American system and the OAS. As you know, coming out of the Summit of the Americas, the United States is committed to our partnership with CARICOM, both individually with each CARICOM member state and multilaterally within the OAS. We are working with our CARICOM partners to make substantial progress on issues like food and energy security, and we look forward to continuing dialogue on these important issues, as well as others raised by the Foreign Minister. Again, thank you very much for your presence and your presentation.
Thank you very much, United States. I'm now pleased to offer the floor to the delegate of Brazil. You have the floor, sir.
Muito obrigado, Sra. Presidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and let me begin naturally by thanking you as Chair of this Permanent Council for convening this important meeting, and likewise express very special gratitude to Foreign Minister Albert Ramdin for his most comprehensive presentation, most enlightening as well. This organization offers 4 important pillars in its action, and the Foreign Minister had, as we know, a premier role in identifying these, and I can only hope that he will continue to occupy an active profile. We thank him and thank the Summit of CARICOM for all of its success, past and coming. But over the summit in the 3rd to the 5th of July, we certainly were able to share our views in coinciding with the President of Suriname as to sustainable development and health and all of the other prerequisites to development. Brazil remains an active and involved partner in all of these spheres and with all of our neighboring countries. We have not let any difficulty, the pandemic notwithstanding, stand in the way of our ongoing involvement in assisting in the development of these countries and working particularly in bilateral areas such as trade, energy, security, defense, and technical cooperation, amongst many other spheres. Our country was one of the first to visit Suriname in a bilateral nature or basis, I should say, in the last years, and CARICOM has served to strengthen those ties, as we saw just recently. Energy cooperation continue to be an ongoing commonality, despite the resources in oil in Suriname, which no doubt will serve the country well in its development. The President of the Republic at the time when it met with President Enrique Santoque, the desire to assist Suriname in developing its energy wealth by means of assistance in the technical sphere from Brazil. We spoke of a number of other spheres as well at the last meeting. But since that high-level presidential meeting, we have also met in a number of different areas and opportunities. APEX, we shared the need that we felt and the desire to add our assistance in the trade areas and in investment areas with regard to Suriname with APEX in Brazil. We, of course, also recognize the challenges that will make development of the energy sector in Suriname important, but all the more reason to bind forces as we are eager to do, particularly with a view to the export of those products. That was but one of a number of other priority areas on the agenda. There was cooperation, there was defense, training in terms of human rights, human capacity training in general, And to that end, we hope to continue strengthening our dialogue and cooperation in our common interests, particularly with regard to transnational challenges. Brazil took a very active role in the meeting on security in April and support with the police of Suriname, which was discussed at the first ministerial meeting of transnational nature that was held last June in Brasilia. There again on security. Brazil, as we know, is very strong in its technical cooperation in the Americas. We particularly were able to offer assistance through 2 water purifiers to Suriname as humanitarian aid, answering an appeal from the Suriname government from 1st of June. We have also worked in the meteorological arena with a view to assist in the hydroelectric dam. And that is but a few, Madam Chair, of the issues that are on our bilateral agenda, which, as you can tell, is very varied and very strong. We are very strong together on democracy, human rights, and virtual learning. Thank you.
To the Secretary General. Secretary General, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Because of your speech, that was very deep in orientation and substance. Also to congratulate you on your 2nd anniversary of your appointment as Foreign Minister and for your steadfast commitment to enhancing CARICOM foreign policy and regional integration between member states. I congratulate the government of Suriname for the successful hosting and chairing of the recently held 43rd regular meeting of the Conference of Heads of Government of CARICOM earlier this month in Paramaribo. Notably, Suriname was the first country in the hemisphere to have invited the OAS electoral observation mission in the midst of the deadly COVID-19 pandemic. That mission, led by Gonzalo Conca, required an innovative approach and paved the way for other OAS electoral observation missions under unprecedented circumstances during the pandemic. I wish to echo Minister Ramdeen's statement at the 5th meeting of the countries of Latin America and the Caribbean held in Costa Rica in March of this year, where he said Suriname reaffirmed the urgency for a coordinated, holistic, integrated, and people-centered response for sustainable development, leaving no one behind. I add my voice to the many who have recognized Suriname leadership on biodiversity and conservation. Suriname is one of only 3 countries globally to be classified as carbon negative, which means that it absorbs more greenhouse gases than it emits from human activities. According to the United Nations, Suriname was the 2nd country in the world to update its national plan to fight climate change, doing its part to ensure that the future temperature of the planet does not exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. The OAS will continue to support member states as they shape policies, programs, and partnerships to mitigate the negative effects of climate change. In February this year, the OAS convened a meeting of Ministers of Energy of the region and the private sector within the context of the Energy and Climate Partnership of the Americas to continue our work on renewable energy transition. Peace and stability are imperative for the survival and progress of our democracy, so that our people are empowered without distinction as to race, nationality, creed, or sex. On this Mandela Day, I make a call to all member states to ratify the Inter-American Convention Against Racism, Racial Discrimination, and Related Forms of Intolerance, and the Inter-American Convention Against All Forms of Discrimination and Intolerance. A healthy and highly principled democracy will allow these opportunities of our peoples to flourish. The well-being of our people and all the people of the world who suffer under inhumane circumstances require us to demonstrate that injustice will not be tolerated or encouraged, and that there must be more rights for more people. Thank you and welcome again, Mr. Ramdeen.
I thank the delegations and the Secretary General for their comments. I'm now pleased to offer the floor once again to Minister Ramdin. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Let me start in a quick response, and I'll try to be as brief as I can. Thank all of you for your remarks, your observations, and also for your kind words. I'm pleased to be back. And Secretary General, thank you very much for the hospitality, and Madam Chair also for convening this meeting. I just wanted to respond with a couple of points which came to me when listening to the member states. First of all, I think the point was made by, I believe, Dominican Republic. A coordinated approach is critical, but also an integrated approach. And with integration, I mean we have sub-regional organizations in the hemisphere. Every regional, geographic region has its own, CARICOM, SICA, South America, Canada, United States, and Mexico together. I think it's important that these organizations meet as well and exchange views at an organizational level. Is not only in terms of the politics of the hemisphere, but in terms of collaboration in other fields, food, energy, agriculture, water. I read this morning that certain areas in Mexico have no water, while in Suriname there's an abundance in water simply because it rains a lot. I mean, these things will happen. So unless we work together, we will not be able to solve these issues. That's the first point I'd like to make. More intra and inter-regional cooperation in the hemisphere. That makes a strong hemispheric multilateral system. And of course, this is the platform where all those views will come. The other one is when we want to be inclusive, it's not only inclusiveness in terms of between the countries, but also inclusivity within our countries. We spoke about youth, NGOs, and others that need to be involved because governments alone cannot bring development. We by now know that. So we need to involve all in society to be part of the developmental process and to get unity and a degree of going in one direction together. The third point I'd like to leave behind is differences will always be there because every region is different. Every region has different priorities. We can make that list very simply. What is relevant in CARICOM may not be relevant to South America. It doesn't mean that it is less important, but it should not be an obstacle to be excluded. So countries have problems, but we should engage to solve problems, a result-oriented approach rather than isolate. Those who know me, I'm never a favor of exclusionary approaches because I think the impact of that will be counterproductive and will take us further from home, further from where we want to be, than that it helps. In some cases it works, in most of the cases it doesn't. Then I think it's important to also indicate, and this is my last point, Madam Chair, is why do we have a multilateral system and why this multilateral system is growing in importance and is becoming more necessary to have everybody around the table? It's for the simple reason that most of our problems, the majority of our problems as a country are cross-border in nature. We need each other to work towards a solution. Alone, we are not going to be able to do that. So when 60% of your problems are cross-border in nature, it requires us to work together. There is no other option. Otherwise, we are fooling ourselves. So we need to make sure that the agenda is set in such a way that the multilateral system which we are looking for, I speak often about a new multilateral system 2.0, simply because it has to be modernized and recognize we live in a different age than when this organization was established, although the core purpose has not changed. peace, prosperity, and stability. So with that, I want to thank you all for the opportunity. I'm happy to be here and I'm happy to engage with you. I welcome you to Suriname and to the Caribbean. I think now we are able to travel a little bit more again, but feel free to come to Suriname and we can continue the discussion. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Minister, allow me on behalf of the OAS Permanent Council to express once again our most sincere appreciation to you for your presence and remarks this morning. I would like to remind the distinguished delegations that the minutes of this special session will include the Foreign Minister's presentation. There being no further business to consider, I thank you all for your attendance. The meeting is adjourned. Adjourned.